this looks good.
Oh my god, this is delicious.
I definitely want to taste that.
All right, and so now we're getting into our plate of the day. And today we are going to be talking about centering Black womanhood and embracing it across genders. Now, Lambie, I think you are one of the sexiest women I know. And and I mean that in so many ways. There are threads of your femininity that I like have deep envy for. Like you envy my eyelids. I envy your cooking. I envy your hospitality. I envy your grace and how you like move around. I envy the way you can twerk and actually dance and have like a rhythm that does echo the femininity that growing up I was told if I didn't have my femininity was not equally valid. And so when I see you in your fullness and like, you know, going from the years where you were, you know, you had dreads and a Bronx Letters t-shirt all the way through now where, you know, you have your earrings and you have your beautiful wraps and like when you turn into Gina, right? Like and Gina, which I want you to sort of like talk about Gina a bit throughout this conversation as well. When I first saw you as Gina, actually, and I don't mean just like you putting on some makeup. I mean, like when you were in full drag for the first time, I was like, wow, that is the person I always see. Like that is her. Yeah. There she is in the embodiment of the femininity, though her femininity is always in Lambie. And so like this whole dynamic of like who is Gina versus who is Skittlez, in the same way that I'm intrigued of like Juan Carlos Ortiz versus Skittlez, right? You know what I mean? Versus Cesa, like, you know, and having these facets. I think it's such a beautiful example that both of you guys actually do a beautiful job of this, of carrying your femininity in the way that you carry it. And it is not because you are copying femininity out of like if I don't do this, then I'm not a great, it is something that you do love and you do connect. And the things that make you feel pretty do make you feel pretty, not because somebody told you that was pretty. And I just love seeing it. And you know, I love this idea of like, what power do we yield as a community when we can center our work around women and womanhood as you framed it. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that and sort of talk about what was your perception / relationship to Black womanhood, whatever that means for
you. Thank you for saying all of that. That's really, really beautiful. You guys are giving me a whole lot of flowers and I really appreciate that. I think to contextualize my answer, you could talk a little, about like how Gina came to be. Dressing up, I was definitely one of those kids who put in his mom's heels. I used to love, wrapping my blankets around me, acting like an Egyptian god, and making I used to wrap scarves up, ball them up, and acted like there were cakes and stuff like that. And then, the process of coming out and stuff like that, and some of those things, and living in a group home and stuff like that, and some of those things had to be put a little bit more to the side for the sake of what I understood about survival, what I understood about ease, and so I feel like I lost a little bit of, over the years, I feel like I've lost a little bit of myself because of that. And there was a point in my life where it was really important to me with the understanding that my skin is Black, and I can walk down the street and everybody that engages with me knows that they're dealing with a Black man. But because of because of the way that I am able to code switch, or because of how people have been talking to me, I wasn't always sure if people knew that they were dealing with a Black gay man. And it was important for that to all be on the surface for me. So Gina Cakestand is an effort in that realm of like really returning back to form for myself, returning back to what brings me joy, to leap around and serve, and also to explore what it's like to wield feminine energies. I think also at the same time, Gina Cakestand came out of a bigger visibility for drag artists because of the popularity of RuPaul's Drag Race, stuff like that. And I have no interest right now of engaging that endeavor, but it's safer now these days to be drag in New York City at the very least. So that I wanted to take on that opportunity, and it's just super, like I said, it's just super fun. Like, I mean, like a lip sync is super powerful, and I think engaging that has always been a thing for me. It's something that I do when I'm cooking at home. It's something when I do when I'm cleaning at home, just lip syncing and like living my truest fantasy, because a bitch can't sing. All of that, and my relationship with my mom is budding, and this touches a little bit on like how I understand Black femininity, because my mom is a very particular kind of woman, a particular kind of woman that does not get space, I think, often that is designed to honor her. And I'm not sure if I'm necessarily trying to honor her either. I'm not sure, but I do know that in my spirit I carry on her story in an odd way, not in a way of like not knowing where I begin at where I end and she begins, but just a matter of me being her son and me be growing up around how she coped with womanhood. And being close to that has consequences for my life. Not necessarily negative consequences, but it has affects. Um, so whenever I'm getting into drag and stuff like that, I am thinking of my mother, because like I said, I keep on bringing this up. Like I was never that kid that was watching a whole lot of movies. I watched a lot of the same movies growing up, and animated movies at that. So I didn't fall in love with the glitz and glam of womanhood. It was very surface level for me. It wasn't something that I was, while I was wearing the heels at home and stuff like that, and wrapping myself up in towels and stuff like that, it wasn't, femininity wasn't something that I took on from I didn't gain my sense of femininity from the American ideal of what it means to be a woman. I grew up around a lot of really strong women, around a lot of women who had to make really hard choices. So much so that it was, and I didn't like, and yet, and you know, I grew up around a lot of domestic abuse and stuff like that, but that was, as again, like I'm a kid of the 90s, and that where I come from was common growing up. And that was one of the choices that the women that I came up around had to contend. One of the circumstances that the women in my life had to contend with growing up. So whenever I think of femininity, not just Black femininity, but femininity, I'm thinking of that level of strength, that brand of strength, that enduring kind of strength, the reality of like not every one of my choices is going to be popular. Not every one of my choices is going to be right. Not every one of my choices is going to be backed up. So I mean, I feel like I'm presenting my drag as something heavier than what it is, because it's actually a lot of fun and it's actually it's a lot of lightness, but that's always in the back of my mind as well. I'm not necessarily interested in just embodying the American ideal of what it means to be a bad bitch. I'm more interested in the everyday choices that accumulate into being a bad bitch. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I hope that answers the question, actually, because that was a whole lot of things actually at once.
No, it 100% did, right? Because it talks, pointing to the perception you had, and I think the insights around watching the ways in which your mom navigates the world definitely frames it. And of course, selfishly for me, knowing Osita Lambie myself, like I know even in a
shout out to Osita Lambie.
Right? But even and you didn't mention this, right? Because we're talking about image, but like I love the competitiveness out of Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Like this idea that like there's the way y'all cook, and because y'all are both equally great chefs, right? Like it's very
request now.
right? Like but to see the bond that comes from that. But again, and not because she's a woman in the kitchen, but there is a femininity, going back to your point of a ritual and communion and ceremony, excuse me, was the word that you used earlier. Like I see how the feminine's energy aids in the ceremony of what those moments mean. And that's, I think, why I love that Gina Cakestand is Gina Cakestand, and that when Gina has a show, she's cooking. You know what I mean? Like cooking, and not always, but like the stuff that you've done for bad. Like I think it's wonderful because it's almost like a sacred space of the way in which your femininity takes a particular mold. And this is what I mean about like even before Gina, you're the sexiest woman I know. Like there's a way in which you actually infuse that love and that energy, right, into everything that you do. So yes, that answered the question. And so, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about, you talked about the ways in which you had to protect yourself for the sake of surviving in your worlds, whether it's the group home or whatever other spaces you occupied. But I'd be interested to know, what was the community's response to your identity? Like, not even just now, maybe even progressively, right? From like moments in which you had to hide versus moments in which you didn't have to hide anymore. And what was that experience like for you?
I exist on the cusp of a lot of different communities. I grew up, I spent a lot of time actually when I was young in the church. I am a product of the New York City public school system. I engaged a lot in theater communities. And I also lived in a group home. And all of those communities had subtle ways in which they expected me, or not, or subtle, I existed in those communities very differently in subtle ways. I remember one time I was one of the youth leaders in my church, and I often had to pray in front of the church. And I remember one time I had my hand on my hip during worship service. And this woman, one of the people who brought me into church, like, you know, she felt the need to, like, you know, tap my hand off of my hip in the middle of my prayer. And I was like, bitch, like, ain't you supposed to have your eyes closed? Like, I was just like,
That's
what I'm saying.
I was just like, you know, unfortunately, like I wish that I had I wish that I had the grace to just really just address that in that moment. But I definitely gave her a look, and I was just like, chick, like, you're interrupting me. But with that said, like, I mean, like, it took me a while to be out at church. Actually never really came out to my church community. A lot of my church people follow me on the interwebs and shit like that, and like I'm sure they got the hint. But I've never had that communication with them. So I mean, like me being a gay man wasn't the only aspect of my identity that I had to beat around the bush for. You know, like I said, I'm a child of the 90s, and I'm saying that very vaguely because I don't really want to get too deeply into the circumstances, but I feel like I hope that people will understand that. And if you don't, girl, read some articles. But you know, dealing with being a poor kid in a poor neighborhood, one of the poorer kids in the neighborhood, and having that visibility, everybody knowing the circumstances because of the bochinche, because of the choices that some of the choices that my mom made. Navigating around that was a bigger task in church than being a gay man, because in church, as long as you're quiet about the homosexuality and you're doing good on the junior usher board and the choir and the laymen's and stuff like that, they'll take you in. That's no problem. In the group home, like, I mean, like, it was just a matter of like being around a whole bunch of men who are also figuring out themselves sexually, around a whole bunch of boys who are also figuring themselves out sexually, even though they identify differently. Like, you know, we're all coming into our sexual being, and navigating around that aspect of that stuff was fun in some cases, but also precarious. At any point, you know, someone can decide that, like, I'm not, you know, even though I'm engaging in these actions, I'm not that person. You are that person. I'm going to throw you under the bus. And navigating that was a trip. In theater, though, like, I feel like there's a lot of ways in which I was able to be the freest form of myself that I was able to be. And I think that that's why I find a lot of freedom in Gina as well, because so much of what, on top of like the exploration of my own femininity and the exploration of like the joy that I feel that I might have relinquished in the name of survival, in the name of transition and stuff like that, Gina is also a exercise in my performance ability. And that definitely was a big thing. I just needed something that was mine. I needed something that was going to make me fall, that was going to reignite my relationship with theater and performance, and stuff like that. So yeah, those are all the aspects of my identity and the ways that I've kind of like hopscotched around that and stuff like that.
No. Finish the thought.
No, I'm a little bit worried though at this point because I just feel like this my identity and like my identity as Gina exists on an intersection of so many different things, and sometimes conveying that I feel I can get very jumbled. So I hope that I'm being as clear as I could possibly be.
Listen.
It's clear to me. Go ahead. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Skittlez, but I'm like, no, it is
No,
not.
no, no. I was just gonna say that I relate to that. I relate to that idea of like with me and like Julissa had mentioned earlier with like me having like Juan and then like Skittles and then like Cesar and
Yes.
like knowing that each part of those is part of your own personality and is part of your identity and validating it, but then also being able to treat it as an individual like thing.
Yeah, I mean, like
it's also like, you know.
Exactly. At school and in theater and the group home, I was Lambie. At church, I was Alex. Um, with my biological family, I was Albie. Like I definitely existed with those different names, which is why, and I'm gonna be very transparent about it, I'm stealing Erykah Badu's intro of like, you know, I am also known as Erykah Badu because like I do sit on the intersection of a lot of different identities, and the way that people engage those identities are subtly different, but those subtleties are important. Those subtleties are what can make or break the relationship, I feel like.
Yeah,
So I
100%.
hear you on that.
And I think that sort of digging into that nuance, what I was going to sort of transition into is, I think even the choice of fashion, beauty, right? Those pieces. And so I'd love to hear about, you know, what like facets of Black femininity, right, have really leaked its way into the way you dress, right? Both Lambie and Gina, right? Like the dressing, what are the beauty standards for self, right? Like the way in which you present the energy that you carry. What, like, you know, where did that come from for you?
Right now it's coming from, you know, straight up my ass. But you know, I remember when I was a kid, like I mean, I was given these like subtle like pair of heels, which was so weird because it was just like, I mean, like I was a kid that was already being bullied for being like, you know, people assuming that I was gay, but I was so determined to wear these heels, but they didn't fit me at all because I felt like that like I connected with them. They were just like these like 2-inch heels, like these black shoes that like I tried so hard to get my foot into. But even in the way that even in the way that my boy look, like it's just, it's very like, um, I mean, you know, I wear my long earrings because I find studs boring. You know, like there's like, if I see something that I like and that is going to and looks good on me, I'm going to wear it. It's not a matter of it's not a matter of like, you know, trying to live up to my identity as a male. um that used to be a thing that I was really concerned about as a teenager, in my early 20s. But now I'm really trying to live more towards like, how do I live? How do I present myself as Lambie? How do I present myself as, you know, the best version of what I know how to be? With Gina, and like, I mean, also like, I mean, like with the energy and like the dancing and stuff like that, that's just who I am. And like, I just can't, you know, it doesn't make it like, I'm very comfortable in my identity as a male, but I don't feel tethered to my dick. I don't feel tethered to a need to prove to people that I have a dick. I've spent a lot of my life not cultivating that aspect of myself. Um, with Gina, on the other hand, it's about the performance. It's about what's going to help, what's going to breathe the most, what's going to help me move the most, what's going to help me tell the story I want to tell on stage, and what feels the most true. Gina is really a project into trying to dig deeper um, into joy and into um, unbridled identity.
And I think what I appreciate about, like, again, the nuance of how you step into it is not tied to, oh, well, in the magazines all the girls are wearing studs and so I have to wear studs because that's beauty. It's really coming from your root, which is why when people are always trying to denounce, like, when men, excuse me, let me be clear, let me use my words that I mean, when men denounce their femininity so blatantly, I'm just like, there's room to embrace it that has nothing to do with your dick, bro.
Exactly.
It's hard. Like, they're not, and I say that as a woman who leans into her masculinity. You know what I mean? Like, super hard, and specifically around beauty. And I think that for me stems from the emphasis around beauty and presentation for women. And I'm like,
Yes.
no, I
Yes.
want to dick, but I don't want to wear a dress some days.
Yes.
And I don't want to do, like, it's not the same thing. And I'm still the same bitch. Like,
Yes.
stop with the box. So I just wanted to echo that. I think that that's part of where my deep excitement around your femininity comes from, is that it's really yours.
But the thing also that's tragic about men who, like, take so much time to, like, suppress their femininity is that they miss the point that they're suppressing a part of themselves. And that there are going to be times when that part of yourself, you will have no choice but to live in that part of yourself. It is ridiculous that men, there's a common understanding that, like, I have empathy for women for the first time in my life because I have a daughter. And that's bullshit. Like, it's just like, like, that's totally bullshit. Like, you could have done more work. You have lived around women your entire life. That is an indictment on you. The point is that there is, by condemning feminism, you condemn yourself. And you for everybody, for condemning the humanity and feminism and femininity, you condemn yourself. And we just need to do better than that.
Yeah. I think at a time, especially where being a black, and we're talking about men in general, but being a black man or a BIPOC man in these times where we're enduring a lot of trauma, like this just in, they didn't convict Trump for the trial, so he got off again, which we all knew was going to happen, but it was just unfortunate because you thought maybe people talking about the fear of their lives would do it. Anyway, the trauma.
We thought that politicians in Washington, D.C., talking about the fears of their lives would make a difference, but no.
It didn't, right? So to endure that trauma, right, there are so many traits that are attributed to femininity that actually have forms that are masculine as well, but don't necessarily shine through. And so a lot of the softness and being kind to yourself and the self-care things are associated with femininity. And it's like, in a time like this, for you to rob yourself of your actual genuine inherent femininity and leaning into that for your comfort and those moments is crazy. And you're traumatizing yourself. You're traumatizing yourself. So I
Most
totally
definitely.
And yeah, so what do you think is one of the biggest, or some of the misconceptions that comes along with how people assume you're embodying your womanhood, or why you're embodying your womanhood?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. Especially, I mean, like, I think in some ways, I feel like the misconceptions come from, like, the very new place that Gina is in. in her development. I've only been doing drag for 2 years, which is not a long time in the world of drag. And I'm also not a club queen. I don't think I will be a club queen. So I'm in a very weird space of like developing Gina. When it comes to my own femininity, people tend to not really like, especially within my theater circles, especially like they don't really tend to like touch on that a lot. I don't find a lot of misconception. If they are misconceived, they stay silent and keep on listening.
Mm.
Mm. Mm.
What do you what would be your answer to that, Juan?
Repeat the question to me one more time.
What is basically like, what's the biggest misconception people have about the way you choose to embody your womanhood?
The biggest misconception, I think, I mean, firstly would be the assumption that like a lot of people just don't know how to handle it at first. They kind of will go to assuming that I am a trans woman and that I am, you know, maybe exploring that realm. I think that for a lot of people, the knowledge of transgender human beings existing and like their journeys is so new to them that pushing it further and saying, no, I'm non-binary, so I'm like kind of in the middle. You know, some days you're gonna see me with a goatee and then some days you're gonna see me with a full face of makeup on. And no, I'm not.
Or both.
You know what I mean? Like, I know I'm not a drag queen. Like, I don't identify as a drag queen because I'm not putting it on for the show. This is how I'm presenting myself today, you know? And like, there's a lot of homework that needs to be done when it comes to like gender expression versus, you know, gender identity and, you know, all that stuff, you know? But I think that would be the first misconception. And you know, it depends. Sometimes, you know, I get treated very differently, you know, and that's why I think it's my responsibility to speak up for the trans community and like advocate or, you know, amplify those voices because I get put in that category. So I get that reaction. Both the hate and the love, you know, like, because there's two sides of the spectrum.
And I mean, like, I love that you brought up the trans community because as you were talking, I thought a lot about like the misconceptions that I would have when it comes to like sex and love life, because I am a big Black man. Like, I feel like the idea of being a top is definitely projected onto me a lot. And when people find out that I'm a big old bottom, I feel like that definitely curtails some interest because I can't use you. I can't be used the way that they want me to be. They want to use me, and how that might and that. With that said, and going back to the ways in which, like, you know, rejection of femininity and femininity is a rejection of the self, is that like the ways that these men who can love and a transgender woman, the way that they will go out of their way to deny that love or to sever that identity from themselves is also a tragedy and breeds tragedy. And that's something like that is always like that's one of the ways in that I have with the trans community as well, where it's just like, you know, it's definitely different from my perspective, but like, it's like, I've been with a lot of guys where it's like, yeah, we can hook up and have sex and stuff like that. But when it comes to identity, when it comes to bravery, I can't go there with you. I cannot go there with you. And I think a lot of people identify with that. It just sucks that we're in a place where, well, actually, this isn't specific to our time. We just have a big spotlight on it. But the ways in which men, again, are just not willing to accept that they can be down for the way that people in general cannot accept that they can be down to love on trans people is just really tragic. That love can be curtailed by something so temperamental. This sucks.
Yeah. And I also just, I think that the sooner that, speaking on behalf of the cis-hets, the sooner we can get on board with just minding our fucking business at the moments where we can't understand, right? Like where it's kind of like, okay, well, you acknowledge it, learn to respect it, and then mind your business about the rest, like the details of it. If you're not living it, if it's not actually directly affecting your life, then just mind your business. You know, it's why I'm always so like, when I'm on like dating apps and stuff and men are like, no trans woman, you know, it's kind of like, what if I put no bum ass motherfuckers who and start listing off shit about you? Because I probably should, because I'd ward off a lot of y'all bum ass motherfuckers who, right? But it's just kind of like, what the fuck is that? Like, what the fuck kind of projection of your fear of what? That you match with someone and you find out, oh, because you don't know how to politely exit yourself from the situation. That's the problem. Because nobody wants to handle having to say, actually, I am a person who, in my levels of comfort, where I'm at in my life, this is not something I choose to participate in. And we think that that makes us an asshole, but it just has to make you what it is. You know, I've said it before, like, you know, when people are like, oh, you sure you straight? And I'm like, it's not even about sure. It's that in the one time in my life where I engaged a girl during a, you know, little menage, right? Like I realized it's just not something I have any desire to participate in, right? But and also, again, the genderbread person is one of my favorite things, because it's like the way you present versus what you feel versus what turns you on and doesn't turn, they're not connected, right? So even that moment, it wasn't a moment of like, oh, because I've always been so curious. I wasn't curious about shit, but it's what we was about to do, and I was sexually curious to know what the fuck a menage felt like, and there was another, so it happened, and I just realized that I wasn't really into it. But that's not to say that as a cishet woman, I'm like, oh, you know, and so I'm gonna condemn pussy and like keep it 10 feet away, because it's just kind of like, I had that one experience and it makes me not crave it, but I'm also not somebody who needs to have a huge reaction that is harmful to someone else about the possibility that that world comes close to mine or intersects with mine in any way. And we don't leave room for y'all. We just don't make room because it takes too, it's like, not to, I feel like in the past couple episodes, I keep relating, you know, the LGBTQ community to being, to the Black community in those struggles, but like, it's almost like waiting for white people to wake up. You know what I mean? It's just, it's so.
And that's what's so aggravating about it, because like the Black community, like, I mean, people of color, like by virtue of the ways that trans people have to speak to power, like it's even a matter, like it's just like it's a matter of survival. The way that they have to speak to power, you are standing on the fruits of their labor.
Right.
We are all standing on the fruits of their labor. So just, I mean, like, you know, it makes me so sad, because I just imagine a reality where like that wasn't a dividing factor. Like we as members of the diaspora have the power to just say that, you know what, actually we have as Black people, we do not care about your sexual identity. We do not care about your gender identity. And like there's still so much, because of we live in America and because we live in a capitalist society and stuff like that, like there's still so much that we have to contend with, but just taking that off the table taking that off the table of just being like, you know, we don't give a shit about that would be huge. If kids didn't have to grow up with so much weight on their shoulders about how they're going to use their sexual bits or how they see themselves and stuff like that. I feel like that will be a huge weight off our shoulders, and that's a power that we have, and that's a grace that we could bestow us onto ourselves that we just choose not to.
Yeah.
And that is a result of history of a whole lot of bullshit. But like, we're at a place right now where we just know a lot. We know a whole lot, and we have access to a whole lot of knowledge, and we can just decide that, like, do what you want sexually, do with yourself as express yourself in whatever gender you feel like expressing or not, and let's get on to the things that, like, you know, that we can't just take off the table for ourselves, you know,
right.
Whatever that means.
Yep, 100%. Whew. Anyway, so last question on this. I just want, Lambie, any advice you have for Black women trying to explore their lifestyles, fashion, expressions, fucking shit, their recipes, I don't know. Like, what are your advice for Black women wanting to explore their Black femininity?
That's such an interesting question. I mean, like, I'm still very much on that journey, and I identify as a man. So, I mean, you know, like, as corny and as flaccid as it sounds, just live your truth, and find your people that are going to help you do that. And I feel like that's not just for Black Black femmes, Black female bodies. I hope I'm saying that correctly, as inclusively as I can. But that's not just for Black women or femme bodies, but that's for anybody. Just live as truthfully as you can. And please send me your suggestions, because I'm, you know, I'm struggling and trying to figure it out too.
Yeah, for sure.
What would be, can I ask, what would be your advice?
My advice, yes, is the living of your truth thing, but also actually don't be afraid to dig into knowing yourself more and understanding that there might be things that are outside of yourself that can help you learn that, right? So, you know, sure, like, let's talk about, like, my hair, right? Like, going through the journey of having straight hair and to having natural hair and, like, all that stuff. There's so much of that could have just stayed on the level of hair and just like, oh, if I do this to my hair, it's damaged. If I don't do it, it's not. And then this is what it looks like here versus there. But also then taking it a step further and saying, okay, and so why was that the choice I was making my whole life? Okay, and who taught me that choice about the thing about my head? And you know, and like, oh, what was the history that backed the fact that this was the reality that I came into? And not being afraid of those things, because I think otherwise, for me personally, this is not true necessarily for all people, then it feels very disconnected and sometimes even just trend based, right? Like, when parts of your identity, you're toting it up and you're toting it up and you're toting it up, like, you know, and if people are going to, not that you have to adhere to anyone's labels, but if people are going to start having certain conversations and include your identity into something that is a larger vehicle for a larger conversation, then knowing your place as it pertains to your opinion of yourself in that space is important to know, because there's a lot of, like, Afro-Latinx women who just really don't connect with this energy of the vibes of the movement. It's just not their truth, right? And they do know their shit, right? But then there are the ones who are walking around getting triggered when they're having certain conversations, because they don't know what they actually think about themselves. And so when they're speaking and they get corrected or something comes out, they feel attacked. But it's like, no, like, don't feel attacked, but also, like, do you really know? Yeah. You know, if you're uncomfortable knowing, then just admit, I'm really uncomfortable knowing what that might mean. So I'm not I'm not there. That's not the place that I'm entering the conversation from. But knowing that is really, really important, I think, would be my answer.
Word. I feel you.
Yeah. Yeah, Skittlez, what would your answer be? What's the piece of advice you would give? Yeah.
For Black women or women in general?
Women in general.
Gosh, if I could just inject a bit of unapologeticness into like all, you know, I feel like so many times I hear, you know, and obviously like even Julissa touched upon it, like her, like when it comes to beauty, you know, because of what society has done or how it's presented, you know, she's a little bit more like hesitant to like just jump in. And I feel like a lot of times that's what I like find out from women is because they either don't want to be bad at it or they want to, you know, or they don't know enough about it or they don't really look into it or like this kind of like hesitance because of how society has molded what being a woman is supposed to be. I just wish that women lived a little bit more unapologetically the way like, you know, people in the LGBT community have to, you know, just kind of do it because people are going to talk whatever, you know, like, I don't know if I'm making sense, like, just like a lot more.
Complete sense. And what's bringing up for me, gosh, and I'm like stopping myself from being like, bitch, we can't go on for too much longer. Oh, you just highlighted or spoke to something that I've been pondering with since I've seen the documentary on Netflix, Transparent, I think it was called.
Yes.
And I think that part of the freezing, I have many theories that I can't like get into profoundly right now, but like I think one of the reasons why, you know, the majority of my top tier best friends are people who are in the community, right, has a lot to do with the fact that some of these beauty standards and things that I'm even disappointed about, I'm coming to learn were not ever mine in the first place, right? That there is this idea and this embodiment of womanhood and like the Beyonce, the Beyonce presence, the Britney presence, right? This like power of the woman that is actually driven by people in the community who are bringing their essence to those women, and then they get to be puppeteered because they're women that are accepted and look. And that's not to say that Britney and these women don't connect with the feminine energies that are coming out of the creativities of others. I'm just saying that a lot of the hyper femininity we're looking at is coming from people who are surrounded by teams, right? And that oftentimes these teams, right, when you get into the creative nook, are people in the community, right? That the embodiment and the sexiness of even a like RuPaul, right? And when you see drag queens or trans people on the screen, they're always this ultimate like neat, like sexiness. And I don't just think that that's, I don't think it's, I think for a long time I thought it's because they really wanted to make it clear that I also can participate in womanhood. And I've had it wrong all along. It's because, no, this is what I embody and this is what my femininity means. And it is so powerful that y'all want a piece because y'all are actually living under the guise of what men want. Right? And the whole idea of like, we can take your man's shit that straight women are so afraid of. So be afraid, right? Because they're owning and they're stepping into their power in a specific way. And that is what's sexy about it. So this boost of confidence that you're talking about and unapologeticness, Skittlez.
And ownership.
Yeah, it's an ownership thing. We don't own our femininity, right? And even the things that we've been taught that are ours are not even ours. But because it's so good and it's so powerful coming from y'all, that's what we want to claim. That's what we want to hold on to. But it is not all ours, right? Like, and I think that we need to learn how to share it. Like we need to learn how to acknowledge, okay, womanhood, right? There are aspects of womanhood that maybe came before these communities had large voice and visibility that influenced that community, right? And so they got some from cis women, right? But then you guys all have stepped into your powers and into, you know, your two spirits and whatever that means for you guys, and have produced authenticity that we then go, ooh, and we get some from you guys, right? And then it's like a give and take. And that is why womanhood is more inclusive than what people want to make it, because nothing about the woman identity stems from a woman alone. It's not about the genitals, it's about the feminine energy. Feminine energy is energy. And the more that we allow people to own how they harness that energy and put it out and let them claim it, so that when we look at a Beyonce, it's not just, oh, because she's a bad bitch woman, and she has a fucking community with fucking, you know, LGBTQ folks who are bringing their essence to continue to elevate that, so that collectively we are making a powerful statement around femininity. It is not owned by the image of people who look like Beyonce. And I think that is so important. And I'm just really coming to that now. So that's what I wanted to say, that sort of like fireworks happened in my brain while you were talking.
Ooh, the fireworks all over. All over.
Yeah, but you know, thank you so much, Lambie, for digging into this part of the discussion with us.
Of course, that's why I'm at. That's where my head is at, really. Because, like, I mean, at the end of the day, too, like, it's like I'm a man stepping into woman's, like, stepping into visibility as a feminine being. I'm a man, like, doing lip syncs, like literally like taking the words of other women and stuff like that. So these are always the things that I'm trying to think about, like, how do I enter this space respectfully without stepping on any toes, and trying to also be as authentic to myself as possible.
Yeah, and I even think this idea of like stepping on toes, like what toes? Your femininity is yours. There's no toes, you know?
Yes, definitely. I think that, yes. I think that definitely, along with lip syncing and stuff like that, there's like a weird line where it can get a little bit I can steal. I feel like I can just steal in a way from intellectual property and shit like that. I feel like I'm always towing that line, but it might be me overthinking things.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe sit with that, because I don't think it's a steal. I'd argue that it's going back to what I'm talking about, this give and take. If you're stealing it, you're stealing it back from women who had it gifted to them from the very people that you know what I mean? It's ours, and this is what I mean. It is not. There's no toe stepping. That is your femininity, and you practice it in a way where it lives in that space of femininity. So it's actually, bitch, move your foot so I don't step on you, because what you step on is their ego. And their business is not yours. That's their business, not yours.
I hear that.
So, you know, anywho. All right. So Lambie, thank you so much for being on today. Tell us any shout outs. Where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram, Lambie0865. You can find me on Twitter now, at the Drama Club on Twitter. I am Alexander_Lambie on Venmo. And
you can hear his writing in the MTA plays, right?
You can definitely, yes, you can hear my writing in the MTA plays. That is, you can go to rattlesticktheater.org or .com. Look up that, or rattlesticktheater.org. And follow the prompts to listen to me and Julisa's plays on the radio plays, and also Juan's awesome voice as an actor. I have another show coming up I have a residency coming up in the near future that I'm very excited about. Yes, excited about my residency with High Arts. That I'm building this really cool project surrounding love and liberation. So I hope to see you guys engaging that.
Yes.
Also, I am a baker on this platform called Chef. My menu is going live, I think, this week, actually. So please buy some cakes from me, from Alexander Lambie, also known as Gina Cakestand.
Yes.
Please. I love that. And where can they find us?
And you guys can find us at Ladies Who Brunch It on Instagram, at Ladies Brunch It on Twitter, at Julissa for her Instagram, at The Real Skittlez for my Instagram. Also, don't forget to hit up that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, comment, share with all of your friends. And yeah.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in this week. And until next time, Bronche.